welcome back. I see the numbers are dwindling as the day goes by, but this is part of the most interesting discussions for me personally, is because you can meet the people doing the work. And as our panelists come back up, and I'll also join the panel for this session, I just want to make a little bit of an awareness. Please, if you're interested in this BIM community stuff, it's a completely voluntary organization. It's national, it's continental. You can join the community for free. You can participate in any which way you like. The point of this community is to learn together, to do together, to figure it out together. And it's discipline agnostic. Every one of us is a beginner. Please don't be afraid to join up, join in, and participate. I just want to make sure that I want to ask you a favor. We've got two researchers who have asking questions about BIMing in Africa and on our context. And on page 41 of your BIM book, they've put surveys up that they are really keen for you to answer if you can. They're looking for questions about BIM implementation, what kind of environment and skills do you believe is important and necessary for graduates and new people coming into the job. Please help us fill those knowledges. And the second survey is about the costs of adoption. A lot of the questions that we were asking our panel shyly. And if you answer these questions in surveys, it'll help us in the research community respond and figure this out and get some parity. So on page 41, please help our researchers from UJ and University of Pretoria and other places to build this up together. All right, so now we are moving on from our first panel discussion about the general roles and functions people fulfill. And now we're going to shift slightly to organizational fitness. There's people in the job, the 15, 20, 100% do it every day person. They have a career, a title, a job. But then there's the company and the organization, and being fit for digitalization is a whole different kind of conversation. And as I say to a lot of my people who ask me questions, students and colleagues, is there's companies who go digital and there's companies who don't. And some of them are left behind, and it's the companies who don't. And it's not really because digital is different, it's just a new medium. The work is the same, as I said in the beginning. You are still delivering information as consultant, owner, manager. That is still the same work. But the medium is different. And companies who don't adopt this medium really fall behind. So with that in mind, I would hand over to our expert panelist again, Amanda. Please help us through this talk. And I encourage everyone to approach us in person, on the floor. We're a very open community. We'd love to answer your questions one-to-one. Don't be shy, and let's jump into it.
Thank you, Khaled. Welcome back to the graveyard shift. At least the food was light, so we shouldn't be feeling so heavy. So we continue with our discussion, and the framing of this conversation is how do we get our people BIM fit? Yeah. We are in Pretoria. I was telling Khaled as we were entering campus this morning that I can't wait till for all 11 languages of this country to shine in each university campus. And yeah, when I entered UP and everything is Afrikaans, I'm like, I don't visit our Stellenbosch campuses often, I'll try to, but I was so excited, I'm like, everything looks Greek, I'm like, what is this language? Anywho, point is, yeah, it would be beautiful that it owns the Afrikaans that is used largely in this area. And because Afrikaans is one of the languages I saw dominant around campus, this is observation, I would like all of you to try the following phase. BIM jou lekker ding. Can we try? 1, 2, 3.
BIM jou lekker ding.
Thank you so much. Got that from the archives somewhere. All right, so to get the framing for the questions, very briefly, welcome. I would like you to share with us that in terms of your corporate strategies across your organization, what period are we looking for when we talk short, medium, long term? So that as we unpack questions, we can have an understanding of, as you're doing planning within organization, what do you consider as a firm, as short-term, medium-term, and long-term? Besides what general economists and strategists can tell us, but do you have a period within your firms that you use that you say, this is a short-term period, a medium-term, and a long-term? Just very, very briefly. Thank you.
I'll pass on this one.
You'll pass on this one. I thought it was the easiest question of the lot.
The way we go about it is our short term is 12 months, and then we do it in multiples of 3. So 3 would be medium, 6 would be long.
There we go. Yeah, so from our perspective is we don't really put a time frame to it. Yes, we are a contractor, so time frames are a little bit flexible. No, I'm kidding. It's more of a short term as a 6-month stint. It depends on the candidates we get and the skill sets that they come with. And from there you define.
So in my current role, I'm in an education role, which gives me a different perspective on the whole thing. And from an educator perspective, I work in time frames of 3 and 5 years, degrees, and what's relevant at a 3 and 5 year tempo. So I don't do organizational relevance, but I do skills relevance, and trying to get that 3 to 5 year tempo going is super important in my world, but it's not necessarily in the business world the same.
Thank you.
Our business work in 2, 4, 6 years strategies, which digital forms a big part of that. But within our engineering department and our design offices, we try to break it up into 6-month periods as well. Unfortunately, project size sometimes plays a role, so sometimes we need to wait until a project finishes so that we can start with the new workflows or new applications on the next project. So historical content need to be taken into account as well.
For us, I think short term is anything between 6 and 12 months, also depending on the initiative or the project that we are taking on. Medium would be 3 years, and then long term also 5 years and more.
We've got a 12-month strategy that's annual, and then we have 3 to 5 and 5 to 10.
Thank you so much. So I needed to set that question to talk about the scoping when we talk upskilling, training, and everything else. The very first question, I will unpack why I asked these periods, but the very first question I want to ask the panelists is, in your dreaming about digital delivery and in the strategies that you share within the business operations part, what investments have you made which 2 to 3 years later became obsolete? Is there anything you can share with those who are about to start to say, hey, we bought this package of software and then 2 years later it became free? Those type of tips. Is there any investment that you can say, the rate of change is so fast that we invested in package A and 6 months later it was free to the market? Just if you don't have that type of an example, then yeah, you can let it slide.
It's the opposite.
Okay.
You pay this much this year, you pay that much next year. No, I think the things that become obsolete are old hardware, and software you just pay more next year.
So that's where your hardware falls part of your 3-year, your medium term. You know, when you purchase, you purchase with the idea that it's going to last for 3 years, so that you have that expense every 3 years and not every year.
All right. The second question is, have you taught yourselves any skill within the team that a year or 2 later became a skill that was consumed by a piece of technology? Is there anything you had invested your time in, and in 6 months later there's a package that does exactly what you were studying for 3 years, as an example? So can you share any of such events within your teams or your personally?
Because we use a Autodesk Vault internally to manage all our projects. Difficult to explain exactly what it does, everything, but on one of it you need to populate a whole long list of properties, allocate or associated with one drawing. We run a lot of reporting, future planning, everything from that one file specifically. And we had to rely on individuals to update those properties as they check the file back in. So if you're done with your civil drawing, you need to say you're at 100%, you've done X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. 180 drafties had to remember to do that. Then we had doc controllers that had to check that it's correct. We pulled reports to make sure that it's correct. So we got a company that's associated with Autodesk that helped us 3 years ago to write a script, and that's automated, no manual updates, less errors, etc.
Thank you. Rich?
I might have a bit of a strange response to this because, again, education right now. But you said like what computers now can do versus what we used to do manually.
What skill have you invested in that a year, 2, 3 years later, there was an application that does the skill you had invested yourself to train in?
Yeah, so it's actually not application, but awareness. So I've noticed, like when I challenge my students to say, have you considered, could this do that? The answer is, I don't know. And finding out that it can has been more valuable than just learning the tool. And that changes your mind. It changes your mind to suddenly learn, oh, I can connect costing to componental levels. I can do that. Can I do it perfectly? Not now, not yet. But I can do that. And that shift is, I find, more interesting than the AI taking your job. It's actually becoming aware of how many things we are doing without thinking about it. That's, for me, the most interesting part about automation, is that we're forgetting to pay attention to the things because we're used to doing it. And actually, if we just reflect a little bit, there's so much better things we could be doing, if I can phrase it like that.
All right. So the main reason I ask these questions to create this scene is that I want you to be aware that when we talk upskilling, when we talk training, be aware of the periods in which you operate in as an organization and what function you want fulfilled, but at the very same time, be aware at the rate of change and how exponential it is. So we are about to get input and advice on how they've upskilled their teams. As you take down the notes, do your due diligence as you walk out the door to say, all right, they might have gone for Moderna training, they might have gone for Autodesk training, they might have done 1, 2, 3, but is there no application that can service this skill that I want to send my people to? At any level of decision making as an entity, as an individual, you need to ask yourself and do due diligence in terms of what function you want to fulfill. There is a function that needs to be fulfilled, and when we talk upskilling, I also like using the term downskilling. And downskilling looks like an advanced Excel user that's going to have all the automated sums and then I just come in, I'm like, all right, you got advanced Excel, but there's Power BI dashboard that does that at a click. So now you need to downskill yourself from all this advanced Excel knowledge to something that just does the click in a second. All right. So the shortest term we've had is about 2 years or so for short term. When I looked at I'm not an economist, so excuse if it's quoted out of accuracy. But the level of confidence in macro markets keeps on decreasing by the year. If you could forecast your returns on investment to a higher level of accuracy in 5 years, that level of accuracy keeps on dropping. The economists in the room would tell us that any financial forecast and rate of returns, you can forecast it to 0 to 2 years with a higher level of confidence. Outside 2 years, the level of accuracy drops, and the confidence in those numbers that you present get weaker and weaker because the rate of change is exponential. Now I come back. How much have you invested in training and upskilling in your teams? If you look at the past 3 years, do you have figures that show the investment and the returns on the investment that you have done?
So this session was called How Do You Become BIM Fit? Yeah. So it's interesting because getting our people BIM fit is pretty much like getting you running fit. You're going to have to train a lot. And you need to get yourself a good trainer. We went for the self-service training as a baseline. So we invested in a platform where there is sufficient content on that platform for everyone to learn the basics of what they need to do in the BIM world. That's number one. And we can measure that. So we've got Power BI dashboards that show us who has actually done what training. We can assign training. Second thing is we started assessing. So you guys also assess, Anien, and seeing where people's growth areas are. So they think that they're good at this thing, and we say, okay, prove it. We do an assessment, and you say, okay, great, so you've got opportunities to improve here and here and here. And by doing that, it gets individual people over that sense of, yeah, I'm fine, I don't need to learn. Because then they suddenly realize, hang on, I know what I don't know, going back to Xavier's point. So I think big investment from that perspective. And then in addition to that, making use of any training that's available that's specialist to technology. So oftentimes if you buy software from a company, they will say there's training included. Use that training. I mean, you've paid for it. So we made specific efforts to maximize using the training that is on offer, that was packaged with the software, and making sure that people attend it. We record the sessions, we make it available. So it's a big focus for us.
Thank you.
I'll speak as an educator. People believe because they understand the definition that they know the work. I see that in school, right? We say BIM is A, B, C, D, E, and student says, I understand BIM. And I think the same applies with upskilling, is people say, I comprehend cognitively what you're saying to me. I don't need training. I think that's a huge gap, and we need to have a humility in cognitively understanding something is not doing the thing. And all of us will need to be doing the thing to be useful to other people. And I think that's holding us back as an industry, is we are very smart people, which keeps us from actually learning to practice. And my students do that a lot. They learn the definition, and then they don't go and practice the thing, and then they step into the trap. And I would say that that's like buying the software but not learning how the training works. And we get quite arrogant with that ourselves, because we have learned BIM. I know BIM. I am IR architect. I don't need to relearn architectural things. And then we unlearn unintentionally. And I think that's what I would like to comment on that type of question.
Just to add as well is we obviously have a similar approach where we create a skills gap analysis of an individual. We then map that to a personal development plan, and depending on where that person is in his career, that will generally be, there will be the short-term goals, the medium-term and the long-term. And then there's also varied levels of training. So we have a similar system where we have the self-learning application that we're using internally. However, that self-learning application is going to teach you the fundamentals, and it's going to teach you fundamentals in advanced levels as well. But then there's training that needs to happen on the job, where you're taking that fundamental that you've learned in the application and actually practicing it on an actual project and identifying that, okay, it's done that way there, but I could actually potentially do it this way here because it's now a real world scenario and I've now learned a new way of implementing what I've been taught there. So there's always going to be practice, as I said previously. Practice makes improvement because you can always better your best in a workflow or in a process.
So here's another perspective. So you're saying training. Training on what exactly? There's hundreds of different software applications and versions out there. So if you take it one step back, and that's what we try to do within our organization, is we took a different approach. We shortlisted the applications that we think will be useful to us. We asked ourselves the question is, what are the problems we want to try and solve? And then we applied two terms. Some of them are a little bit crass, so I'll turn them down. So it is mess around and find out, is number one. And number two is fail. Yes, exactly. And the other one is fail fast, fail forward, meaning giving the enough experience to an individual to say, here's the software, trial it, test it, tell me what you find out of it. You're actually applying the knowledge. We've gone through certain iterations and realized certain software is a brilliant software, but it doesn't solve our problem. Then once we have identified those specific software applications, then you can say, okay, let's go deep into more formalized training. Because now you're zoning in on, this is really a tool that I want to use. Similar to what Richard has mentioned is on the BIM ISO 19650 is utilizing training providers out there. Our organization has opted to use a company called Operam to get ourselves up to speed in terms of what the ISO standard's about and what BIM is about. And how we, as a contractor, can get involved within that process of information generation and sharing.
Amanda, I just want to add from a different perspective. We focus with this a lot of internal training and getting the soldiers on the ground, BIM Fit, which is very important because we can't reach the end goal. But what's also as important is your management that deals with clients that gets all these wonderful requests need to be able to manage the expectations. They need to understand the basics of BIM as well. So it's an entire company-wide upskilling, not just everyone that's going to produce your BIM models.
Also, there's a significant gap. I mean, if you look at people who are already in the industry, to get them enabled. So, I mean, talking, say, from a similar position as Khaled, what we're doing at UJ, at least in the unit that I am in, is offering short-term courses. I mean, 12 months. There's a course, there's somebody who's in practice, it's block release. People come in and do that. Then there's the sort of medium-term ones, masters, MPhil, and so on. So it's trying to bridge that gap, especially for people who are already in the industry, who are already practicing. But for those who are sort of undergraduate and so on, it's also because the major complaint really will be, well, they know all the theory, but they have no skills to fit in immediately. So, I mean, fortunately, the vendors, software vendors, provide all this academic software and so on. So then the students get trained on that.
Sorry,
Sure, Anien?
go for it.
What I just want to add, apart from your more formal training and learning paths within your organization, I think it's also important to have a more informal approach or look at more informal initiatives like mentorships and knowledge sharing sessions. It can be on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. So in our company, within our disciplines, we have weekly knowledge sharing sessions where we come together as a team and someone presents on a topic and share some experiences on a project, something that they figured out, some workflow that they've discovered or put together. I think that's also important, and it also helps you stay up to date with trends and what's going on in terms of BIM technology and industry.
So what I want to also just kind of clear up as well is when you start in a company, right, the skills that you're going to require is based on what that company is currently using, right? Okay. And when we're talking about BIM is quite, there's so many facets in there that we can take out and we can put it into different sort of roles and say, okay, I'm going to need training in this, need training in that. Okay, technology is a big part of building information modeling. That is where it starts. That's the starting point for getting information digital, right? So, for the students, familiarize yourself with the various applications that is out there, right? So that you already have a stepping stone when you start looking at joining a company, and you're going to make it easier for that company as well at the end of the day, right? The next phase of that would be, or maybe going with that would be information management, right? Because then your information management is going to walk together with your technical ability in using technology, right? And then the last one would be understanding what contractual requirements is out there for various projects that you're going to be working on. And that was the stages that you've discussed in the previous sessions. And then mapping all those together and understanding what skills do I need for stage 0, what skills do I need for stage 1, and you can go and basically map everything up until stage 9. I've never worked with 9, so up until stage 9, and you will be able to identify from a information management point of view, this is what I need to know. From a technology point of view in stage 0, this is what I need to know. And then when you get to work stage 4, this is where, and if you map work stage 4 with ISO 19650, which is part 6, that is where you're generating the documentation, right? There you need to have the technical ability to use the applications that is currently in industry. And that is how you carry on with getting yourself BIM fit, and that is how we do it also within our companies as well.
Thank you so much. I apologize if the framing of the next question is offensive in any way, but trust me, I've got such a rich vocabulary, and if I can't find better words, that means, yeah, it's a struggle. Within these project stages, the understanding is that there are different stakeholders with different capacities to consume information. At times, it's not even consumption that is the problem, but it's the expertise. They sit with different expertise. And they need different views of this project, which sits in this digital and rich data format. Can you please share with us what upskilling is required in your experiences where you had to dumb down the digital richness of the data to get points across? Whereas at the same time you felt, I so wish they could understand, but the more information you provide, it's overwhelming to the other party, and that dumbing down is required. So in which instances can you share where the dumbing down was such a frustration because you feel you are losing information that you had worked so hard for and it sells the point, but the other party won't understand because it's just too much? Because those are the areas we need to upskill, isn't it? So that we can share all of this rich data. But which points of stage 0 to 9 and which teams and which stakeholders do you feel need upskilling so that we don't wash down our beautiful digital information?
Let's downskill it first and say the technology has allowed us to generate so much amount of information, and 90% of the information is not really valuable or needed. So rather focus on what's the information that you need. Reduce it, because you can have terabytes worth of data, but you only need 1 megabyte, because that's the problem you want to solve at that moment.
It's to determine the level of detail versus level of information at what phase of the project.
Are we understanding? Do we understand? The panel seems to be in sync with what they are saying, but do we understand what they mean?
Okay, let me break it down.
Please upskill us.
So you got team number 1, right? Team number 1 are on fire, whoever that team is, right? They are working, everything's on computer. They're working with all their information on the cloud. The 10 team members that are working together, everyone can see the same information at the same time. If you make a change, I can see the change. If I make a change, you can see it, and we're creating this design together, right? That's awesome. Team number 2 gets forced to work with team number 1. Now, team number 2 works in paper. And all of their stuff is on drawing boards or on AutoCAD. Nothing wrong with AutoCAD, but it's flat and it can't be combined with Revit or ArchiCAD. And now suddenly team number 1 and team number 2 can't share information because the stuff doesn't fit. That's a problem. So at the beginning of the project, team number 1 says, stuff you, we're going Revit. Team number 2 says, okay, we're going drawing board. Suddenly, 2 months down the line, you can't check whether your designs fit. The whole thing's broken. So that level of information need that you mentioned is all about saying, guys, hang on. We need information that's going to help us get to the finish line of this project. We need information that's going to enable the thing to get built. Second thing is team number 1, yes, see, they like modeling. They model down to the tiniest little detail. Team number 2, they're like, no, we don't need that much detail. You just need to know where the things are, and the contractor will figure it out on site. Second time round. They've got totally different ideas of how much detail needs to go into the model or onto the drawings or needs to be produced for contractor. So that's the second mistake, is they didn't figure out, okay, but what's the happy medium and what does the contractor actually need in order to build the thing? So understanding what information do you need to do, how are you going to produce it so that the team can work together like that first session this morning, and what's actually significant that needs to be used. And if you don't figure that out, then all the other things that Khalid's about to mention won't work either.
I had a very nice experience once, where I was working with someone who was much older than me and much more experienced than me, and it was a QS. And she was a single-person company, small project, and we were a BIM team, we were team A. And I had this really nice experience because the QS made it simple, and I asked her, how do you work? And she says, I do this way. I first do this, I then do that, I then do this. And we were able to identify how we could adjust our work to eliminate half of her work without her needing to upskill. And that process solved 20% of the budget of the problem off the bat, because we erased effort that she didn't need to do without disrupting the disciplines.
I rather like the UK approach, which said, by 2016, thou shalt. And, everybody was quaking in their boots. So what is this BIM? What is this? So if you're going to work on my project, because I know it's going to, BIM is going to bring efficiencies, thou shalt. I'll tell you it works. You go to Rwanda, you see there's nobody that drops a piece of paper. So sometimes the stick is quite useful.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, Ambrose, because, if you have a look at that development, the UK particularly, and there's some really interesting papers written about this for those who are in the project management world, the UK went through a period where they had a series of mega projects. And again, I think it was a combination of the mandate and those mega projects that stimulated the change. Again, the UK, we read about the success stories, but there's a lot of parts of the UK engineering that is still stuck in the 19th century. Don't be fooled. But the Olympics, the Crossrail, the London Underground, and the big highway projects, those mega projects were what catalyzed their change more than anything else. And the major contractors, remember the UK works slightly different to South Africa, where the contractors often take a leading role and they appoint the professional team with them. Those contractors had the muscle and they had the mega projects to make the change. But yes, and I think that they had excellent timing in hindsight. And I think that those two things work together.
Agreed.
All right, then just back on the technology side of things, is I think you can't just say, throw tech at it and it's going to solve the problem by itself. I mean, if you look at the BIM process, it's people, technology, and process. I mean, technology should be the last thing that you go to. People is very important to get them trained up, understand the system. The process, of course, ISO is on its way, explaining how the process will be done. And then when you get to technology, again, there's an article that I read the other day. It says you can throw as much technology at it, but if you don't change the traditional mindset and willingness to explore and find out how this can benefit you as a professional, you can have a difficult time. So technology is important. And skilling up, I mean, the internet is out there, it's available. Vendor suppliers are there. If you're a student, you can get student licenses. YouTube is full of free training sessions that you can skill yourself up. So there's a lot of easy, quick ways to get yourself up to speed and understand what's available. What the industries use, I mean, there's a different debate about that, but the resources are there and it's available. So I think make use of that.
And getting people BIM fit, I think there's, the project space helps a lot. And in another life, when we do lean design and construction, yeah, coming. When we do lean training and stuff like that, on lean budgets, we always say, start with what's, we don't do post-mortem, we do pre-mortem. Before we start the project, not just what have we learned, but where are all the things that will go wrong? How can we make something 10% better this time? And that's on the project level. But on the human level, we say, what are you doing that is taking away important time for you today? Because we don't put attention on that stuff. You know, like that 2.5 hours a day that we're looking for information in a bad way. Those little things make you BIM fit. Because those little things that you stop doing and put your attention on something else, at a system-wide level, make you BIM fit. You can learn on LinkedIn and Revit and everything, all that technical stuff you can learn stepwise. But your reflection on how you spend your time and how you are about to spend your time is something we miss. And that's actually where your fitness for the marathon comes in, is in those little details.
Right. Thank you. Now, the drivers to change that I picked up were linked to projects. And projects is expected income that can offset any expenditure that will be done, isn't it? So when you have a project, you've got bank. You're going to have an expense, buy your laptops and everything because you're looking, all right, we've got this mega project, we can invest. So for me, that means we need to rely on clients to create the change, isn't it? That's what it would translate to. We are in a solution space. We want to upskill people who do not have projects so that by the time they have projects, they have the skill to fly with it. So, with what you know and where you are and how you've invested in your firms, how can we put upskilling outside the project space where there is no expected income, but the skilling needs to happen? How do we talk to industry bodies who are here? Who do we call to contribute in this upskilling? Because tell you why. Strategies to change, they look very exclusionary in the beginning. They look like they reserve a port for those who do have projects, and those without projects can't upskill. I mentioned this line to say strategies to change look exclusionary because I want to share with you what's currently happening in the university space. We need to redesign curriculum so that we can do the upskilling at the university level. Yes, digital is a culture. We're not going to teach you to be BIM. We're going to teach you to be a construction manager that is able to be a digital practitioner. But part of that is to say, at entrance requirements at UCT, this is what we're discussing, we need to change the laptop spec for you to enter into the program. Strategies to change look exclusionary in the short term because you've got no one to invest in that change, and it will exclude those who do not have projects, which means they don't have bank. If we are going to have practitioners in general industry, medium term is 3 years. These firms are sitting trying to decide, do we buy this laptop for this practitioner who 2 years later can jump into another firm? We are sitting with upskilling decisions for the benefit of the industry, but the investments is incurred by someone else. How do we invest outside the project, outside the business, for the benefit of general industry? How different can we look at this, where it doesn't rely on a firm and their own ROIs, that it doesn't rely on UCT as an example, or a university saying, we can't add you into this program because you can't buy a laptop of 165,000. Who needs to bear those costs of upskilling? Because the tech we need, we've agreed we need the tech, but who bears this cost outside the organizations without being exclusionary? Anyone?
It's a bit like, yeah, it's a bit like thinking about immigrating to a different country, right? When you actually arrive in that new country, then you'll, be drowning in change. New culture, new language, new food, new weather, new everything. But all of us know if you're going to be doing something like that, you're going to find out as much as you can about that country before you leave. It's the same with the change, I think. Sure, being employed in a company that is already changing, you're going to learn a lot. That's like being there already. For those of you who don't yet have an opportunity to be in that space, or you're not working on projects that are there yet, or the clients that you work for haven't asked for it and your company is saying we're not yet investing, it's no excuse. You can still find out a lot. And so I think that's probably the biggest step you can take, that's cheap and affordable to do, is to find out, to understand what are the actual parameters involved.
Thank you. We do have a Q&A session tomorrow. We will be taking questions. So if you do have any additional questions as we proceed in these 2 days, please keep them and remember them. You can put them on one of the WhatsApp groups and so on, so that you also contribute into the conversations. But for now, thank you very much for lending me your ears in these last 2 sessions.